All right, everyone, welcome. With your exam just around the corner, we're going to build a complete picture of the neuroendocrine system. We'll dig into the fascinating story of how your brain really acts as the ultimate command center, sending out chemical messages that control, well, pretty much everything in your body.
So let's kick things off with a really fundamental question, one that connects neuroscience to all of biomedical science. How does this 3-pound organ sitting in your skull manage to coordinate the whole show? Everything from a sudden jolt of fear to your most complicated social connections.
Well, your body has two major long-distance communication networks. You're already familiar with the nervous system, right? Think of that as sending a super-fast, direct text message to one specific person. But today, we're all about its partner, the endocrine system. This is more like a public broadcast announcement on the radio. It's slower, it goes out to a massive audience of cells, and its messages are these chemicals called hormones. And it's this system that the brain conducts like a master orchestra director.
So to really understand this system, we've got to learn the language it speaks. What exactly are these chemical messengers, these hormones, and how do they work their magic?
You can think of hormones as chemical words. They get released into the bloodstream, they travel everywhere, but, and this is the key, only the cells with the right receptor, the right listener, can actually hear the message and do something about it. And crucially, not all these hormonal words are written in the same chemical language.
And here we see a really fundamental split between two classes of hormones. On one side, you've got the hydrophilic or water-soluble ones. They can't cross the cell membrane, so they basically knock on the door, bind to a receptor on the surface, and trigger a rapid-fire chain of events inside. But then you have the hydrophobic or lipid-soluble hormones like steroids. These guys just walk right in. They slip through the membrane, find a receptor inside the cell, and often march straight to the nucleus to change which genes are being turned on or off. It's a slower process for sure, but the effect is much deeper and longer lasting.
Okay, so this brings us to a super important point, something you'll definitely want to have straight for the exam. Given these two totally different ways of working, which class of hormone do you think has the biggest, most direct impact on the brain itself? And remember, the brain isn't just the controller, it's also a target for these messages.
And the answer, well, it all comes down to a critical gatekeeper, the blood-brain barrier. This is this highly selective membrane that protects the brain. And because those hydrophobic steroid hormones are lipid-soluble, they get an all-access pass. They can slip right through it. This direct access lets them get inside neurons and alter gene transcription, leading to really widespread and long-lasting changes in brain function.
All right, now that we've got the language down and we know how some of these messengers get direct access to the brain, let's zoom in on the command center itself, the place where this whole incredible process gets organized and controlled. Sitting right at the top of the command chain is the hypothalamus. I want you to think of it as the CEO of the endocrine system. It's constantly taking in information from your body, from the outside world, and using it to keep everything in balance, what we call homeostasis. It's in charge of everything from your body temperature to how you react to stress.
Now, every CEO needs a chief operating officer, right? Well, that's the pituitary gland. But here's the cool part. It's actually two distinct structures. The posterior pituitary is almost like a direct extension of the hypothalamus. It releases hormones like oxytocin, the love hormone, and vasopressin directly from nerve endings into the blood. But the anterior pituitary is a true gland. It makes and releases its own family of hormones, but, and this is key, only when it gets a specific memo from the CEO, the hypothalamus.
Okay, let's put this command structure into practice. We're going to look at the perfect case study, and trust me, this is a guaranteed topic for your exam, the body's stress response. It's a beautiful illustration of how all these systems work together.
First up, we have what's called the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, or HPA axis for short. This is your body's slow burn, sustained hormonal pathway for stress. It's a cascade. The hypothalamus releases CRH. That tells the pituitary to release ACTH, and that in turn signals the adrenal cortex to release the famous stress hormone cortisol. It's a beautifully regulated chain of command, with feedback loops at every step to keep it all in check.
And this leads to something I bet every single one of you has experienced. Ever wonder why you get sick the minute your exams are over? Well, one of cortisol's main jobs is to suppress the immune system. So after a long, stressful exam period, when your cortisol levels finally drop, it's like the brakes come off your immune system. It can finally ramp up and fight off any low-grade bugs you've been carrying around. That's why you feel awful the second the pressure is off.
But wait, the HPA axis, that's only half the story. Your adrenal gland is actually a 2-for-1 deal. The fast response is the sympathetic adrenal medulla, or SAM axis. This is pure nervous system. It makes the inner part of the adrenal gland, the medulla, dump adrenaline into your blood. Your heart pounds in seconds. That's your fight or flight jolt. Then, minutes later, the slower HPA axis kicks in to provide a sustained wave of hormonal backup.
So far, we've mostly talked about how hormones manage our day-to-day state. We call these activational effects. But their role is so much more profound than that. Hormones are also the fundamental architects of our brains, especially during critical windows of development. We call these organizational effects. A perfect example of this organizing role is the hypothalamus-pituitary-thyroid axis. See, it's the same command structure we just talked about, but with a different mission. This cascade results in the release of thyroid hormones, and these are absolutely essential for the brain to develop properly. They guide things like getting neurons to the right place and wrapping them in myelin, which is the insulation for our neural wiring. And the real-world impact of understanding this is just massive. Look at this. Before we had routine screening for newborns, congenital hypothyroidism was a significant cause of intellectual disability. But today, a simple heel prick test at birth can spot it, and immediate hormone therapy allows for completely normal brain development. It's an incredible success story for biomedical science. Now, in a similar way, gonadal steroids like testosterone organize the developing brain, creating structural differences, or dimorphisms, between male and female brains. But here's a fantastic paradox you should definitely remember for the exam. In many mammals, the hormone that actually masculinizes the brain isn't testosterone. An enzyme in the brain called aromatase converts testosterone into estradiol, a form of estrogen. And it's that estrogen that does a lot of the work sculpting male typical neural circuits. Crazy, right?
So that's the organizational stuff. It sets the stage early on. But then hormones keep activating those pre-built circuits for the rest of our lives, powerfully shaping complex social behaviors like who we're attracted to and who we bond with. A classic animal model shows this perfectly. Take two species of voles. Genetically, they're super similar, but their social lives, complete opposites. The prairie vole is famously monogamous. They form lifelong partnerships. The montane vole, on the other hand, is promiscuous.
So what gives? Why the huge difference? And here is the key takeaway. This is so important. It's not the hormones themselves. Both voles have oxytocin and vasopressin. The critical difference is the distribution of the receptors for those hormones. In the monogamous prairie voles, they have a much higher density of these receptors in key parts of the brain's reward system. This literally wires the act of social bonding to the feeling of pleasure, which powerfully reinforces that pair bond. And of course, this isn't just about voles. In us humans, this activational role is happening all the time. Hormones like estrogen aren't static. They actively change the brain's plasticity. For example, studies have shown that as estrogen levels fluctuate during the menstrual cycle, the number of synaptic connections in the hippocampus, a key area for learning and memory, actually changes too. And this all leads to some really fascinating functional differences, likely stemming from that mix of organizational and activational effects. For example, check out these studies on emotional memory. They found a striking difference. When recalling a strong negative memory, men tend to show more activity in their right amygdala, whereas women tend to show more activity in their left. And that brings us full circle, leaving us with a final big picture question for you to think about as you're pulling all this material together for the exam. We've seen how hormones organize the very architecture of our brains and then continue to activate its circuits every single day. So it raises this profound question about the intricate dance between our biology and our life's experience. Good luck with your studies.